The Slave Who Stitched His Master's Eyes Open, Georgia 1841. Dr. Cornelius Blackthorne. Georgia, EUA, 1841. Cursed archival warning. 3 researchers who studied this case developed inexplicable night terrors and permanent insomnia. This may be your only chance to discover secrets that have haunted investigators for decades. Without your immediate engagement, the algorithm will permanently bury content about mysteries that challenge sanity. Chronicle of Forbidden Mysteries Haunted Special Edition, 1841. The Slave Who Stitched His Master's Eyes Open. Terrifying discovery reveals plantation experiments that defy nature. Exclusive investigation exposes medical conspiracy that haunts to this day. Brave readers, prepare to discover truths that have disturbed investigators for generations. For years, whispers murmured in medical corridors spoke of experiments that transformed innocent slaves into living nightmares. What we discovered transcends the worst fears of human imagination. The case of Ezekiel Freeman, a 23-year-old slave from Whitmore Plantation in rural Georgia, exposes sinister conspiracy that extends to the darkest circles of antebellum medical experimentation. This is not Gothic fiction. Every line has been verified through documents that should never have survived time. In 1841, while our society debated the morality of slavery, an organization known only as the Circle of Ocular Dominion conducted experiments that transformed human perception into instruments of supernatural terror. Ezekiel Freeman was chosen not by chance, but for characteristics that made him perfect specimen for diseased obsessions with visual manipulation and psychological control. Terrifying transformation documented in daguerreotypes. Confidential documents obtained by our investigation reveal that Dr. Nathaniel Crowther, sinister mind behind the operation, had developed procedures that forced slaves to perform acts of surgical horror upon their masters while maintaining consciousness throughout the ordeal. Ezekiel Freeman was subjected to ritualistic training that transformed a field worker into an instrument of ocular mutilation. Medical daguerreotypes, preserved in archives that librarians keep locked under 7 keys, show demonic progression, surgical instruments being crafted from plantation tools in the first week, anatomical studies of human eye structure in the second, practice sessions on deceased animals in the third. At 23 years of age, Ezekiel presented surgical precision that would challenge experienced physicians. Sinister circle financed by cursed plantation families. Our investigation discovered that the circle received financing from industrial dynasties obsessed with achieving psychological dominion through ocular manipulation science. Each experiment cost fortunes, paid with suffering of slaves transformed into guinea pigs for diabolic ambitions involving visual control and perpetual surveillance. The rituals conducted combined medical experimentation with medieval occultism. Ezekiel Freeman was kept in underground cells decorated with alchemical symbols, subjected to ceremonies that mixed surgical procedures with Latin incantations that made blood freeze in veins. Corrupted authorities protect conspirators. Evidence reveals that municipal authorities, influential families, and corrupt members of the clergy were aware of the circle's sinister activities. Death records were falsified, families were silenced through shadowy threats, and any official investigation was systematically sabotaged by invisible forces. Dr. Harrison, medical examiner who subsequently developed night terrors, secretly documented impossible anatomical discrepancies, slave bodies with surgical precision beyond their education, masters found with eyes sewn open using techniques unknown to contemporary medicine, brains with plaques characteristic of induced madness. Physical evidence of psychological manipulation that defies scientific explanation. Nightmares haunt investigators to this day. Every person who investigated this case developed inexplicable psychological disturbances. Margaret Thornfield, librarian who discovered the archives, began seeing shadowy figures watching her from impossible angles. Dr. Blackthorne developed paranoid obsession with being observed continuously. Professor Crow refuses to close his eyes since seeing the daguerreotypes of Master Whitmore. Cursed archives reveal demonic methodology. Our investigation led us to the State Medical Archives, where we discovered evidence of systematic tampering that suggests supernatural intervention. Pages torn with surgically impossible precision, stamps that changed color according to light, signatures that seemed to move when observed peripherally. The crucial discovery came through carbon copies that librarians swore they had destroyed decades ago. These documents appeared mysteriously organized on our research table one morning, as if invisible forces wanted the truth about Ezekiel Freeman to be revealed. Crowther's diaries written in temperature-changing ink. Dr. Nathaniel Crowther maintained records in ink that transformed according to ambient temperature, revealing hidden texts when handled. His annotations, written in archaic Latin mixed with alchemical symbols, describe procedures that defy both medicine and physics. Ezekiel Freeman was identified in records as ocular manipulation subject prime, designation that reduced living human to object of visual experimentation. Selection criteria were disturbingly specific: slaves with exceptional manual dexterity, all born during lunar eclipses, considered biologically suitable for precision surgical conditioning. The consciousness preservation serum, developed by Crowther, combined radioactive elements with glandular extracts from preserved cadavers, creating compound that the scientist believed could maintain awareness during extreme surgical procedures. Injections were administered directly into the spinal cord during nocturnal ceremonies. Daguerreotypes that haunt anyone who observes them. Photographic series attached to reports documents transformation that haunts anyone who dares look at images for more than few seconds. Initial daguerreotypes show Ezekiel Freeman as strong field worker with calloused hands. Subsequent images record deterioration that seems to continue even after photographer's death. First week, hands develop surgical steadiness that defies explanation. Second week, eyes acquire focus that reflects anatomical knowledge impossible for slave. Third week, facial expression shows psychological conditioning that erases human emotion. Fourth week, Ezekiel Freeman presents appearance of surgical automaton programmed for specific horror. Most disturbing aspect was that slave's consciousness remained intact within psychologically conditioned body. Psychological records document Ezekiel Freeman crying for freedom with voice mechanically trained for surgical precision, creating existential contradiction that tormented even the most hardened executors. National Network of Haunted Laboratories. Intercepted correspondence reveals that Crowther did not operate in isolation. The Circle maintained network of collaborators in at least 12 states, all conducting variations of same experiments in laboratories that were subsequently abandoned due to inexplicable manifestations. Each laboratory received financing from local industrial groups, creating national conspiracy of slave exploitation disguised as revolutionary psychological research. Total number of victims may reach hundreds of slaves, all sacrificed on altar of scientific ambition corrupted by obsession with ocular control. Financial records show that each experiment cost fortunes provided by families who subsequently suffered inexplicable generational curses, premature deaths, induced madness, permanent insomnia. As if participation in conspiracy brought visual retribution. Underground installations where perception behaves strangely. Ezekiel Freeman was kept in underground complex built 3 floors below main plantation house. Modern visitors report that mirrors stop reflecting properly in location, shadows move independently of light sources, and photographs reveal images of people who died decades ago. Environment combined medical equipment with alchemical symbols engraved on copper plates that oxidize and restore cyclically. Temperature fluctuates independently of heating systems, and there are reports of whispers in dead languages echoing during new moon midnights. Ocular consciousness transfer, theory that haunts science. Technical documents reveal that experiments with Ezekiel Freeman were part of much more sinister and comprehensive project. Circle had developed pseudoscientific theory called ocular consciousness transfer, combining experimental medicine with occultism in way that defies rational comprehension. Central hypothesis suggested that human visual perception could be extracted from one person and concentrated in substances administrable to others through specific rituals conducted during surgical procedures. Crowther believed he was distilling sight into elixirs of perpetual surveillance. Underground laboratory where vision behaves abnormally. Ezekiel Freeman was kept in specially constructed cell where physical laws seemed altered. Mirrors reflected different images depending on observer's position, plants grew and died in accelerated cycles, and photographs revealed that images aged independently of photographed subjects. Environment combined state-of-art medical equipment with alchemical symbols that glowed with inherent phosphorescence during experiments. Temperature was controlled not by thermostats, but by lunar phases, and illumination provided by candles made with substances that made shadows move against light direction. During weekly rituals, Ezekiel Freeman was positioned in center of circle engraved in floor while Crowther and assistants recited incantations that made air vibrate with frequencies causing visual disorientation. Simultaneously, Slave was subjected to procedures including spinal fluid drainage and radioactive substance injections. Development of impossible surgical capabilities. Records document that Ezekiel Freeman developed abilities that defy surgical physics during experiments. Crowther observed episodes where Slave demonstrated knowledge of anatomical procedures beyond any training, spoke about surgical techniques that wouldn't be invented for decades, and showed understanding of ocular anatomy that surpassed contemporary medical knowledge. Most disturbing were precision projections recorded. Ezekiel Freeman began to describe surgical procedures in perfect detail before performing them, as if he existed in multiple skill levels simultaneously. Crowther interpreted manifestations as evidence that experiments were expanding subjects' surgical consciousness. Existential suffering documented in psychological reports. Medical daguerreotypes show Ezekiel Freeman simultaneously developing characteristics of trained surgeon and traumatized slave, surgical precision with slave's terror, anatomical knowledge with human desperation, mechanical skills with conscious awareness of horror being performed. It was biological contradiction that transformed existence into constant surgical nightmare. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, nurse who subsequently developed selective amnesia about period, wrote in diary, "Every night I hear Ezekiel Freeman crying in basement. They are not tears of slave nor groans of surgeon, but laments of someone who exists in all states of consciousness simultaneously." Ritual of ocular culmination, final cursed ceremony. Experiments reached climax during ceremony that Crowther denominated ritual of ocular culmination. During procedure that extended over 3 consecutive nights, Ezekiel Freeman was subjected to final process, complete extraction of what scientists believed to be concentrated surgical consciousness. Objective was to collect substance that Crowther theorized contained decades of surgical experience compressed temporally. This essence would be refined and administered to paying circle members as elixir, promising not only surgical skill, but control over visual perception itself. Final medical records of Ezekiel Freeman are too disturbing for complete description. Slave, at 23 chronological years, presented characteristics of master surgeon, but maintained consciousness that existed simultaneously in multiple states of awareness until final moment. Supernatural consequences haunt participants. Professor Edmund Crowe, specialist in historical secret societies, developed disturbing theory. Circle of ocular dominion was not just manipulating psychology, it was altering local perceptual structure. Experiments may have created anomaly that continues affecting anyone who investigates case. Evidence of this theory: every investigator who studied Ezekiel Freeman archives developed symptoms of visual distortion, nightmares involving multiple versions of themselves being watched, and distorted perception of being continuously observed. As if knowledge of case caused perceptual contamination. Haunted survivors break decades of terrified silence. Our investigation managed to locate 3 survivors who witnessed events of 1841, all developed psychological disturbances that persist decades later. Their accounts, collected in interviews that needed interruption multiple times due to panic episodes, reveal details no official document recorded. Sarah Whitmore, plantation owner's daughter who aged prematurely. Sarah Whitmore, now appearing centenarian at 78 years, was young witness during experimental period. She received us only after presenting specific credentials, and kept all windows closed during interview, claiming that daylight makes her remember what she saw. I was only 14 years old, Sarah recalled with voice oscillating between youthful timbre and ancient croak, but immediately perceived something was altering vision in plantation. There were corridors where mirrors reflected differently, sounds of surgical procedures that seemed to come from past and future simultaneously. Sarah was only person outside Crowther's team who directly witnessed Ezekiel Freeman during surgical conditioning. One night, working beyond schedule, she accidentally witnessed ritual through basement window and was never same. What I saw changed not only my life, but my perception of sight, she continued, her hands trembling with rhythm that didn't correspond to chronological age. Hooded men, candles burning with flames moving against wind, and in center a slave who existed in multiple states of consciousness simultaneously. Thomas Morrison, son of cursed medical examiner. Thomas Morrison, 85 years old appearing 50, inherited not only secret annotations from his father, but curse affecting family's visual perception. Mirrors in his house reflect different images depending on time, and old photographs show him aging inconsistently. My father knew experiments were altering local perceptual structure, Thomas explained during interview that lasted simultaneously 2 hours and 6 hours depending on clock consulted. He found slave bodies with surgical characteristics impossible for their training. Dr. Morrison had secretly photographed victims, including Ezekiel Freeman. Images show contradictions persisting decades later, when observed quickly, show normal slave, when contemplated longer, reveal surgical precision, when photographed again, appear different at each revelation. My father suspected Crowther had discovered how to manipulate visual consciousness, Thomas added. Found evidence that perception aged independently of body, as if each sense existed in different perceptual timeline. Reverend Caldwell, survivor with fragmented visual memories. Most devastating testimony came from Reverend Caldwell, 92 chronological years appearing different ages depending on lighting. At 9 years old, was selected for program but managed escape before final procedures, though not without permanent visual consequences. Caldwell still exhibits visual anomalies, reflections that alternate between ages according to seasons, scars that appear and disappear, and mirror reflection showing versions of different ages. His memories exist simultaneously in multiple perceptual timelines. They kept us in cells where sight functioned strangely, Caldwell recalled in presence of his grandson, who observed disturbed how grandfather's appearance changed during conversation. There were other slaves, maybe 10 or 12. Ezekiel Freeman was in adjacent cell, and I heard not only his current cries, but echoes of surgical procedures he would perform. Caldwell described rituals where slaves were forced to participate in ceremonies mixing medicine with visual manipulation. White men chose different slave each night. When they took Ezekiel Freeman, he returned existing in multiple consciousness states simultaneously. Final moments of Ezekiel Freeman, fragmented surgical existence. Caldwell's most disturbing description involves Ezekiel Freeman's final moments. He had become something defying description, slave, surgeon, victim and executor existing in same body. One night I heard not only surgical sounds from his cell, but perceptual echoes of all consciousness states happening simultaneously. Dr. Margaret Thornfield, who interviewed Caldwell decades later using regressive hypnosis, confirmed authenticity through details coinciding with never-published documents. Caldwell's memories show perceptual fragmentation persisting today, he literally remembers the future. Visual curse persecutes investigators. All testimonies converge, Investigating Ezekiel Freeman's Case Causes Perceptual Contamination in Researchers. Every person studying archives develops similar symptoms: distorted sight perception, irregular aging, memories of events they never lived. It wasn't just medical experiment, concluded Sarah Whitmore, whose appearance changed visibly during our interview. It was rupture in perceptual structure continuing to affect anyone approaching truth about what they did to that slave. Visual curse remains active, investigation ends in terror. Our 2-year investigation revealed truths that not only shook our sanity, but altered our fundamental perception of visual reality. Circle of Ocular Dominion didn't just conduct experiments, created anomaly persisting to haunt anyone daring to investigate Ezekiel Freeman's case. Dr. Nathaniel Crowther never faced terrestrial justice. Records suggest he may have discovered how to prolong existence indefinitely through visual manipulation, possibly existing today at impossible age. Some investigators report sightings of man corresponding to his description, always appearing to have exact same age. Ezekiel Freeman, existence transcending death. Officially, Ezekiel Freeman died in 1841. Extra-officially, multiple witnesses report manifestations suggesting he may exist simultaneously in multiple perceptual timelines. Visitors to Old Plantation site describe encounters with slave appearing to be Ezekiel Freeman, always asking, "What do you see when you look at me?" Location remains haunted by visual anomaly. Today, ruins of Whitmore Plantation are avoided by local residents reporting inexplicable phenomena: mirrors reflecting different ages, shadows moving against sun direction, and whispers of voices speaking about surgical procedures that make no sense. Dr. Cornelius Blackthorne. Final warning: this investigation ends here for personal sanity reasons. Remaining archives will be permanently sealed. We recommend readers avoid investigating this case, as knowledge may cause irreversible perceptual contamination. Visual time limited for access. Every person watching this documentary reports distorted perceptual experience. Some feel they watched for minutes, others for hours. Without your engagement in next moments, perceptual revelations about visual manipulation will be permanently suppressed by algorithms. Like before it's too late, in any perceptual timeline.